Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this session. We're going to have a specific session dedicated to the decarbonization of ports and specifically Port of Barcelona. Ports have a key role to play in the challenge of decarbonization, and we're going to dive into that. In this program, we have 4 speakers who are going to share with us their thoughts. And afterwards, we have a round of discussions. And the 4 speakers kind of have a bit of an outside-in perspective. We start with a global initiative of ports that cooperate. Then we go to the region of Catalonia. Then we go to the city of Barcelona. And finally, we end up talking about the Port of Barcelona. So that's the program of this session. Starting now with the global perspective from Antonis Michael. He's the technical director of the World Sports Sustainability Program. That is a program of a large group of globally cooperating leading ports that together work on addressing climate change and on decarbonizing the ports and shipping industry. Antonis, thanks a lot for being here with us. And I would like to give you the floor to share your experiences and ideas and challenges with decarbonization.
Thank you very much, Peter, and thanks very much to the organizers for the kind invitation. It's really an honor and a pleasure for me to be here on behalf of the International Association of Ports and Harbors and the World Port Sustainability Program in particular, to celebrate the, let's say, the ambitious targets of Barcelona towards decarbonization. And I'm very much looking forward to hear the forthcoming presentations as well and to learn more about the initiatives undertaken by the Port of Barcelona in that respect as well. So a great pleasure. I will start my presentation, and I hope you can also, I hope that you can also see my screen now. I think I did it right. Yes, that's great.
Yes, you did.
Thank you very much. So I will start my presentation, let's say, from, I'm not going to go through background, but from the gray past of IEPH, and it's gray because it's an old organization established back in '55, let's say, to the colorful future as we started it with the establishment of the WPSP in 2018, very much inspired by the UN sustainability agenda. And the central pillar of what we do, which is really also the topic of today's event, which is climate and energy. That is the pillar which is the more developed in our activities in IEPH and the World Port Sustainability Program. Again, we started WPSP in 2018 with a great ambition to implement all 17 Sustainable Development Goals on port practices, policies, on port strategies. And that's a broad and ambitious scope and a broad and ambitious target. We channel the SDGs into 5 main areas of interest, 5 pillars of what we do: resilient infrastructure, community outreach and port-city dialogue, safety and security, governance and ethics. And as I said, our most developed pillar, and the one that we are even most proud of, is the one on climate and energy, where we carry past work under our previous initiative, the World Ports Climate Initiative, and we bring that to the future in quite a successful way, as I will demonstrate. So what our ports are doing for decarbonization of their own, of the ports and of shipping as well, which is very important in line with the ongoing debates at the International Maritime Organization, and we are all very much aware of it. And what a better way to show what ports are doing by giving you a snapshot of the climate and energy content of our WPSP portfolio, our database of best practices by ports worldwide. And we can see there splendid information and a wealth of information, splendid examples ports are doing on decarbonization, from investing and producing renewable energies in ports, from testing and piloting various innovative technologies and fuels, from looking at the logistic chain, how to achieve zero-emission trucks, zero-emission vessels, highly ambitious targets towards carbon neutrality, and again, the topic of today's session, to see also and to celebrate the plan that is now put in place by the Port of Barcelona, and innovative also circular economy projects and so forth. So a wealth of information. I'm not going to go in detail. There are more than 70 projects by ports worldwide on the link that you can see on the slide here. So I would warmly encourage you and invite you to visit and see the good work that is being done by worldwide ports. Currently, as we speak, we are running our public vote to define the winners of our 2021 Sustainability Awards. And obviously there are 3 projects that are the finalists of the climate and energy pillar. And those contain a project by the Port of Gothenburg on carbon capture and transport, most innovative project by the Port of Rotterdam on an innovative logistics system, how to achieve zero emission services for inland waterway transport, and a collaborative project and a joint ambitious strategy and targets by the ports of Tacoma and Seattle in the US and the Port of Vancouver in Canada. So you have until next Monday, the 31st, midnight, Central European time, to go on the link and vote for your favorites and help us define the winners of this year's competition. Not only on climate and energy, but those are the ones that are relevant for this session, of course. So individual ports are doing a lot to decarbonize themselves and everything, but a very important aspect of our work at IPH and the work of the ports as well is to look at the shipping side as well and see how we can help and assist and facilitate the decarbonization of shipping. A huge topic that would require obviously huge investments and a huge change on the landscape we're living. And in that respect, IPH pioneered a few years ago the IMO relevant resolution that encourages the voluntary cooperation between ports and shipping on achieving greenhouse gas emission reductions from ships. And that resolution identifies 4 areas of potential port intervention and potential cooperation between ports and shipping in that respect. Starting with the provision of onshore power supply from renewable sources while ships are at berth, moving to the safe and efficient, how we can ensure as ports the safe and efficient bunkering of low and zero carbon fuels in our ports, the provision of incentives to greener vessels, to vessels with an outstanding performance in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, and last but definitely not least, how we can enable the port call optimization and the just-in-time arrival of vessels through accurate data exchange between ports and ships, through accurate data definitions and cooperation throughout the chain. And as IPH and WPSP, we are extremely active on all those 4 areas. On onshore power supply, with already from last year, we had in close cooperation with the Port of Barcelona and the World Port Climate Action Program, we revisited and updated previous work on OPS that was done under the World Port Climate Initiative already 10 years ago. On the safe and efficient bunkering of low zero carbon fuels, we have our splendid Clean Marine Fuels Working Group in IPH that develops tools and methodologies to ensure exactly that, safety bunkering checklists, audit tools for bunkering companies. We started that work 10 years ago with LNG and developed those tools. Now we are transforming all those tools for the new, really low and zero carbon fuels, ammonia, methanol, hydrogen, you name it. And it's a very important work of what we do. Port incentives, our flagship product, of course, the Environmental Ship Index, the standard index worldwide that is used by ports to measure ship performance, and on that basis to give port use reductions to best performing vessels. And port call optimization and our strong involvement within the International Task Force in that respect, and with liaising with IMO. Also, IPH is partner to the IMO Norway project Green Voyage 2050, which actually aims, our role would be to exactly develop training packages on those 4 areas: onshore power supply, safe, efficient bunkering, low carbon fuels, port incentives, and port call optimization. So it all ties together around that resolution on what we can do to directly facilitate. Obviously, the decarbonization of shipping requires the new fuels to come in the market, and it is a huge change and huge investments required, and a support at the policy level and at every level, really. A pillar that, well, actually the body that encompasses, and it's the overarching body of everything that we do on climate and energy, is the IPH Technical Committee on Climate and Energy. And that has got obviously a strong policy focus to start with. We are the representatives of the world ports at IMO in the Marine Environment and Protection Committee, and we oversee the implementation of the IMO greenhouse gas strategy in that respect, preparing submissions, interventions on behalf of IPH, but also organizing workshops, technical workshops to make up our own mind. This afternoon only, we're having a workshop on market-based measures, economic instruments to address the decarbonization of shipping. And we're very much looking forward to formulating IPH views in that respect as well. Secondly, we also coordinate between the various initiatives that are ongoing on decarbonization. Many initiatives are popping up even on a daily basis. We need to keep an eye in order to avoid duplication and to ensure collaboration between parties and coordination of the work being done. Last but not least, we're getting more and more active on port performance, and we're foreseeing the establishment of an IPH global port tracker. Already we published in 2020 our first sustainability report as WPSP. This will be repeated this year and will be published towards the end of the year. And this concept of the global port tracker will feed to it. An important climate and energy pillar there with some simple indicators that will be included also within the report and would be in the form of an annual survey that we'll be doing within our member ports. So I think, Peter, that with that, I covered a bit my 6 minutes of fame. Last but not least, I want to thank you very much for your attention and also to warmly invite you to join us in the World Ports Conference 2021 that will take place virtually, hosted by the Port of Antwerp later in June next month. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Antonis. I think a very, very good, very clear overview that really shows kind of how ports are truly global, international, and the only way to effectively kind of tackle and address decarbonization requires this global perspective and also global cooperation. At the same time, and that's the interesting part of ports, they are of course embedded in a region, in a certain location. And therefore, there is an obvious second kind of group of stakeholders that are deeply influential, and that's the regional government. So that brings me to Salvador Samitier. He's the head of the Catalan Office of Climate Change, a specific office dealing with climate change of the region of Catalonia. Salvador, I can only imagine that in your work there is ample attention for ports, and that you also have a specific kind of set of targets and instruments in place. So please share your policies and your challenges going forward.
Thank you very much, Peter. First of all, I am very glad to be today here, and thanks to the organizers the opportunity to explain what we are doing. This is my first presentation as the new department that has been created in the new government in Catalonia. This is the new Department of Climate Action, Food and Rural Agenda. So I think this is a good sign of the idea of the new government to promote and to work hard on climate action. I want to share my presentation, so I hope you see it well. So in fact, the Energy Transition Agreement and the Law 16/2017 on climate change that both were approved in 2017 really are the fundamental features of the energy and climate transition in Catalonia. Both of them are obviously aligned with the energy and climate policy and the objective of the Spanish state and the European Union. Some of the targets that are included in these two documents are the climate neutrality and also almost 100% of electricity from renewable energy source in the horizon on 2050, a maximum level of energy saving and efficiency. Also, increase the electrification of demand, but also a selective use of some biofuels or some renewable fuels, including hydrogen, especially for certain specific sectors with a demand for fuels that are difficult to replace by electricity in the short and medium term. The maximum level also of participation of citizens and the energy consuming companies in this new energy model, both must be placed at the heart of the energy model in Catalonia in next years, and also diversify renewable electrical mix with hydroelectric, photovoltaic, wind, also both terrestrial and offshore. Both instruments build the strategic framework necessary for Catalonia to move towards this new energy model and to be involved in the global fight against climate change. I would like to remember that these two instruments are the result of a broad consensus between the government and the civil society and most of the political parties in the Catalan parliament. But in 2018, the Catalan government taken a step further and declared the climate emergency. And why the government did this? Basically for three reasons. The first is that the risk or threat is clearly and scientifically established. The threat is now. The threat is accelerating and is ahead of predictions at the moment. And the system on which the economy is based is at risk of significant global instability. The second one is that there is a reasonable probability that it can happen and the impact can be huge and unacceptable for the world and for Catalonia also. And also the third, the necessary response to deal with it and reduce the risk to an acceptable level requires an extraordinary mobilization of resources. The solution cannot come from the reform or the adjustment of the system. A transformation is necessary. So in 2019, we approved this climate emergency declaration, and some of the main elements of this commitment are reducing the vulnerability of those social sectors that are most sensitive to the impact of climate change. Also declare as installations of strategic territorial interest the renewable facilities, and also to carry out a specific territorial strategy for the implementation of renewable energy installations. Also review the current Catalan legislation in order to detect those rules that perhaps even favor the emissions of greenhouse gases or make difficult to combat climate change. And in this sense, in November 2019, we approved a new law of urgent measures for the climatic emergency. And for example, this new law amends the urban land planning law, facilitating the installation of renewables in the urban areas and withdraw some barriers to the implementations of self-production systems in buildings and in the public space of cities. Repeal the previous decree that the experience was that limited, in fact, the implementations of wind and photovoltaic farms, and also taking place a new administrative procedure in order to be less time consuming, because we don't have many time to change our energy model. And also assume the urban mobility model has to be based on public transport, car sharing, micro mobility modes, and on zero emission vehicles. And what about ports? We think that it's necessary the progressive electrification of ports in order to facilitate the connection of moored ships to the electricity grid. This means, for one hand, less greenhouse gas emissions, and for the other hand, less pollutant emissions like NOx or particulate matter that worsen the air quality in cities. This is a very important issue and synergic with the climate change fight. Increase also the railway network by the transport of freight from inland to the port and from the port to inland. In Catalonia, the railway transport of freight is underdeveloped. We need to increase it a lot at this moment. Also, to do greenhouse gas inventories of the activities that take place in the port, and to include programs to reduce this inventory. In fact, in Catalonia, we have one voluntary program to inform and to report emissions for every organization. And last but not least, and although today we are talking about decarbonization, I also would like to underline, don't forget to adapt to climate change, not only because for the impacts of that directly could affect the port activities, but also how port activities can worsen or reduce the climate change impact on the surrounding ecosystems. Past experience could be useless with the new climate scenarios, so it is necessary to update knowledge and anticipate for these new scenarios, these climate scenarios. For me, this is all, and thank you very much for your attention, and I will be ready for the questions later. Thank you very much, Peter.
Thanks a lot, Salvador. I think, again, there are very clear implications for the port. The offshore wind, also the aim to increase rail, the aim to electrify ongoing transport. Those are things to easily write down, but if you really need to adapt your whole logistics systems to that, that's a major challenge. So we're looking forward to hear from the port. But before we go there, we now go to the municipality. Barcelona is, of course, a port really deeply embedded in the city. And a city that also has very kind of ambitious programs. So that again shapes the context in which the port operates. So we go to Ares Gabas, the head of urban resilience of the city of Barcelona, to share with us your ambitions and measures that you have in place and that you have in mind for the future.
Thank you very much, Peter, and the organization for giving us the opportunity to participate in this session. And on behalf of the Climate Office, Barcelona's Climate Office, I'm going to bring the municipal perspective and talk about what we're doing at the local level. So I'm going to share my screen. I hope you can see it. Yeah. Okay. So there's probably no need to insist on this point, but just to set the stage, global warming is happening, and we are already suffering its impact. And in the case of Barcelona, future climate projections show that we will have an increase in temperatures that, depending on the scenario, can vary from 3 to 1.7 Celsius degrees by the end of the century. And this more or less 1 degree of difference, which may seem insignificant but has dramatic consequences, depends on whether the Paris Global Agreement goals are achieved globally or not. And also we will have differences or changes in the rainfall patterns, which will mean more frequency and intensity of both drought periods and extreme rain episodes. And all these will have and actually already have an impact in different sectors and services of the cities, such as, well, heat has a direct implications in the health of the population, especially the most vulnerable people in low-income elderly, but also on the water availability or the impact on critical infrastructures. So in the light of all this, we have in place a climate plan, which was launched in 2018, and the Climate Emergency Declaration, which was launched in 2019, just like the one from the regional government that Salvador was just mentioning. And the main features of both the plan and the declaration are that they are integrative. We don't start from scratch. They are plans that integrate all the different strategical plans of the city and align them with the Paris Agreement goals. They are both science-based, which means that we have conducted assessments and studies on the climate projections and also how these future climate scenarios will affect the functioning of the city and critical assets and services. It is innovative because it entails a change, a very radical change and transformation on the city model. And it's also, we don't lose focus on the vulnerable population. It's very people-centered and also co-produced with the citizenship and involving the different stakeholders that we need to get on board in order to achieve these ambitious objectives, which mean these ambitious objectives to 2030 are the lowering 50% of greenhouse gas emissions from the records of 1992, reaching carbon neutrality by 2050, but also on the adaptation side, aspects of the climate plan, increasing the green infrastructure, reducing water consumption, and including the social perspective, accessing, making energy and water resources accessible to all people, and also insisting on this need to tackle the climate change from different sectors of society, also enhancing and subsidizing citizen action. Just to get to the closer and to insist on the fact that this climate plan is very ambitious and we need to approach it from the different sectors. This is the graphic of the reduction of the CO2 emissions by sectors, which is very distributed. So this means that we need to work it very collaboratively with all the different sectors. And you can see the port and the airport that are responsible for 12% of the emissions. So it means a great deal of what the port does and what the airport does has a big impact on the reduction emissions and to achieve these goals. And just to give some figures, we have been able to decrease greenhouse gas emissions, but we still have a way to go, and also a lot of room for improvement regarding the sources, the energy sources, in order to make them more renewable. So as I was mentioning, it is a very ambitious plan that entails a radical transformation of the city on the way we plan it, on the way we design public space, but also on how we move and the infrastructures that we project, and also important changes in the economic and the energy model. So just to close, that reminder that it's time to act. We cannot wait, and we need to do it all together.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Ares, for your contribution. Again, showing very clearly that there's going to be a huge transition, and that the port, given its location, will have to be a front runner in this transition. So that, I think, is a very good bridge to Jody Torrent, the Director of Strategy of Port of Barcelona. Jody, I think based on what we've heard so far, the expectations are high, right? You operate in a region that wants to be a leader. You operate in a city that wants to be a leader. So yeah, I think that has all kinds of implications for the way you move forward in terms of achieving decarbonization. So please share with us your ideas and ambitions.
Okay, thanks, Peter, for the introduction, and thanks obviously for the invitation to be part of this panel session. I'm going to try to share my screen also. Hope it works. I guess you can see it in front of you full screen. Yeah, okay. great. So I will try to catch up from my previous from the previous panelists. Before, the objective of this 5 minutes presentation is basically to introduce what we have agreed in our strategic plan 2021-2025 that was recently approved in our board of directors in January, which, as a reminder, the board of directors has the representation of the different administrations and stakeholders of the board, both public and private sector. But before I go deep into the strategic plan, let me, as a reminder, let me give a few figures of our sector that I believe have not been given before today. First, and for those that are from the sector, this is already very well known, the logistics sector, understood as transport, warehousing, inventory cost, etc., accounts for approximately 10–11% of greenhouse gas emissions, global greenhouse gas emissions, and maritime transportation accounts for a little bit less than 3% of greenhouse gas global emissions. I think that according to the latest IMO report published in 2020, the evolution of greenhouse gas emissions from maritime transport from 2012 to 2018, I think, has passed from 2.76 to 2.89. Okay, so this is the contribution the logistics and maritime transport, including ports, make to climate change, the negative contribution. We, as objectives on the medium and long term, as we have seen from the previous presentation, I think we are perfectly aligned with the region and with the municipality, who have obviously as well an objective to cut by half greenhouse gas emissions by 2030, and the objectives to be carbon neutral port in 2050. Okay. This, when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions, just as a reminder, air pollutants in the city, ports are also important contributors, as you know, and it has been mentioned. But let me say that fortunately or not, the Port of Barcelona is not an industrial port. So compared to industrial ports, and I'm not going to name anyone, but compared to industrial ports, our contribution, negative impact on the quality of the air of the city is much lower than ports that host industries, refineries, and industrial activities in general. And it is, fortunately or not, we don't host almost no industrial activity at the port, so our contribution in terms of NOx, small particles, etc., is very small compared to other ports. We are still the main contributor when it comes to SOx, obviously, because this is a very important component in the fuel for vessels. But as you know, or you may already know, the global sulfur cap on fuel has been significantly reduced since 1st of January 2020, thanks to the entry into force of the new IMO regulation that reduces the cap from 3.5% to 0.5%. Okay. So let me go now directly into our new strategic plan that was approved in January this year by our board of directors. As you see, obviously, our mission of the port has not changed much. I think the mission of a port, in French, la raison d'être of a port cannot change, because it's why we exist. But we have made some significant changes, which is obviously adding our mission, which is still to provide infrastructure and services that make our customers competitive in order to be able to generate prosperity and generate occupation, but doing it obviously always in a sustainable manner. We have to understand that ports are extremely important when it comes to the competitiveness of exporters and importers, of generation of occupation. Barcelona more than others, because we host not only a port but logistic facilities where approximately 37,000 people come to work on a daily basis, and most of them qualified for occupation. So, still we have to provide infrastructure and services that make those companies competitive, obviously in a sustainable manner. Our vision, this is a vision on the long term, so I will skip it here because we don't have a lot of time left. On the short term, we have fixed three main, what we call general objectives. One for each of the three main pillars of the sustainability. The first is to keep serving a high added value economy, no? And increasing a little bit, only very little, no? The amount of foreign trade that goes through a port. In 2019, before COVID, this was approximately 67 American billions of foreign trade, no? So we plan to reach 70 billion by 4 years, so it's more or less stable, no? Keep the occupation that we generate in the port. As I told you before, in 2019, before COVID, we had 37,000 people coming to work on a daily basis to the port. So keeping this, the number of occupation, which is an important challenge given the trends of automation, robotization, digitalization, teleworking, etc. No? But we occupy a very significant part of the coast of Barcelona. So one of the main contributions we can make to the city is generate occupation for the city itself. No? So despite automation, robotization, etc., we have to push and be able to generate occupation in the port area. And finally, and this is the subject of today's session, decarbonize the port activity. As a global indicator, we have taken probably the most significant project we have ahead of us for coming years, which is developing onshore power supply, what we call electrification of our terminals. And we have fixed an objective, very ambitious objectives, I would say, compared to what is being done in Europe today, except when it comes to OPS, onshore power supply, except California, Vancouver, and some Scandinavian ports. Europe is lagging behind those front runners, and I think this objective of being able to electrify 50% of the container and ferry ro-ro terminals in the port is very ambitious, and more ambitious to manage to make the shipping lines connect the vessels to those OPS installations. So this is the general objectives we have for the coming 5 years. We are now on the first of those 5 years, and these are some of the what we call strategic and operational objectives for those coming 5 years. I'm not going to go obviously through all of them because we don't have time, but just let me highlight or point out a few of them. Obviously, the first, as I said, OPS deployment in the terminals. Generation of renewable energy in the port area. I think we have lots of potential in ports in general, in Europe in general, and in Barcelona in particular, in order to be able to generate renewable energy in the ports. This last week, for instance, we inaugurated the new solar panels, for instance, to just name an example, in our border inspection facility. Okay, and we have other ongoing projects for warehouses, for terminals, for the Fisherman's Wharf, for instance, so generating renewable energy in the port. Intermodality, I think my colleague from the Generalitat de Catalunya, from the regional government, mentioned intermodality. We have been in the Port of Barcelona a front runner as well here. Most of the traffic that enters or leaves the port, containers, cars, that goes beyond 100, 150 kilometers, does it by train. Okay, when it comes to finished vehicles, approximately 45% of the cars that enter or leave the port, they do it by train. When it comes to containers, 15%. But we haven't managed not to attract to intermodality traffics that go to 50, 60, 70, 80 kilometers distance. So we have ambitious plans in terms of infrastructure, ambitious plans in terms of developing services in order to be able to attract this traffic that today goes on the roads to trains. And here, and maybe we'll have time in the session of Q&A, we need the cooperation of all stakeholders, both private and private. Also, it's the replacing old infrastructures. We have infrastructures with problems of operational problems that we need to replace. Now, if you look, I'm looking out of the window here in my office, we see some vessels waiting outside the port, some with the engines running, okay, waiting to enter what we call the liquid bulk, how do you call it? Liquid bulk berths, okay? We have to refurbish, develop new berths in order to avoid vessels waiting outside and doing long maneuvering inside the port, etc., both for containers, for liquid bulk vessels, and for cruise ships. Okay, make new infrastructures, not increase the capacity, but replace all capacity for a new capacity in order to make operations more efficient, and more sustainable. Okay, I just mentioned a few of these actions that we have in our strategic plan, and just to conclude, because I think I'm over my time slot, this is a little bit what our port would look like in 2030 with those spending and infrastructures, with all the facilities for energy creation, OBS deployment. As you know, we are also working. We also work a lot in developing bunkering through LNG. We know LNG is not the most adequate fuel today for climate change. It's a good fuel for fighting pollution in cities, not for climate change, but in the transition period until the industry, the sector find alternative fuels, hydrogen, ammonia, whatever. We believe it's a good contribution from the sector in order at least to reduce pollution in cities. No? So I think I should leave it here, Peter, and give the floor back to you, I guess, for the session, the Q&A session. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Jody. Very interesting set of insights there. But let's quickly go to some questions, because that, of course, is also a relevant part of this debate. I think the first question that I would like to ask is really kind of the stakeholder support for all of this, right? I think in these major transitions, the only way to do them in an effective way is to make sure that they are broadly supported by all groups in society. And of course, that's not a given. We've seen in France the Gilets jaunes. No, they initially started to protest against rising fuel prices. Just as one example of what can happen when you try to transition, but you're lacking stakeholder support. So I think this is essential. Maybe if I can start, Ares, with you, I can imagine that in the city of Barcelona. This, and I also saw it in your plan in a way that you really have very explicit efforts to combine energy transition with a kind of stakeholder support and a kind of inclusive approach.
Yeah, sure. As mentioned earlier in the presentation, we need the involvement of the different key stakeholders, because the emissions are very distributed. Also, the competencies in the city are very distributed, and this is a radical change that we want to achieve in the energy model, but also in the economic one, which is very, very linked. They're very linked together. So yeah, of course, it's a key aspect of the success of the plan, being able to involve both the citizenship on the one hand, by creating this awareness. Actually, I think we have had a good example of the awareness and commitment of people, especially young people, over the last years, but also the different stakeholders from the private sector that have a very important role.
Yeah, I think that if I can use that as a bridge, Jody, to go to you. I mean, because as a port, you're in a kind of complicated situation, because the biggest role in the energy transition is to help clean shipping, decarbonized shipping. So there, of course, these private stakeholders are critical. How do you try to kind of get these shipping companies to make these major investments that are needed to decarbonization? Sorry.
Yeah, it's true. I mean. This is something, I mean, we haven't started now with sustainability in the port. We started, I would say, coinciding with the Olympic Games in 1922, we started lots of different actions that we don't have time to mention. No? I think that obviously now we are in a turning point now. In the past also, sometimes cooperation with some of our stakeholders or even customers was difficult in some measures. At the end, we have the responsibilities and the competences that we have, but the port, very often, we cannot make things go faster, despite the main responsible for taking some actions is not us, it's the private sector. And I can mention this again, the OPS, onshore power supply, which is a very good example, I think. We have decided to invest a lot in deploying OPS in terminals, despite we know that some shipping lines might not be ready to connect to the. We had tomorrow, and we are planning to have some terminals already with OPS next year, and some shipping lines may not be ready. The same happened with LNG. No? We have developed services, infrastructure, procedures for LNG bunkering when some shipping lines were not ready. So I think we have the responsibility to act sometimes as front runners, to push everything, despite some people might not be ready. But at the end, legal responsibility in some aspects is not ours. No, but yeah.
Good. I think a very good point. I think, Antonis, maybe this is a point to where you have a perspective as well, especially on the policy side of this. Because I think, every individual port and every individual region can do only so much. But there is a need of a clear, global or European, perhaps to some extent, kind of policy framework. What are the steps that in your view needed to be taken at those levels to at the end of the day being able to live up to the ambitions and live up to what our obligation to decarbonize?
Yes, thank you, Peter. And indeed, the role of policies is very important. And maybe we could somehow distinct here between, let's say, the shipping side or the sea side and the land side, obviously. Because from an international perspective, obviously, on the shipping side, we have an international regulator, the UN agency, the relevant one being the International Maritime Organization, of course. While on the land side, there isn't such a global governance necessarily. So we rely more to specific governments or regional governments, such as the European Union on that. But on the shipping side, clear global rules are needed. And obviously, nobody is extremely happy with the progress at IMO and the level of progress, let's say. At the same time, we need to realize the challenges. The challenges primarily being the political realities on the 174 IMO member states and the different interests and how to protect their local economies out of a fast decarbonization, let's say. But definitely global rules are needed. Also, regional rules can sometimes be beneficial. We have now all the ongoing discussion about the European developments and to potentially including shipping on the European emission trading scheme, for instance. Those initiatives might seem like pushing through global regulations through IMO, but at the same time, I think that what ports would like to avoid is to end up with a mosaic of different instruments in different parts of the world which are not compatible between them. So all this work needs to be coordinated on the global scale, and the role of regulation and of policy is extremely important, as you mentioned, Peter.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Antonis. Salvador, maybe to there kind of go back to the region of Catalonia. I can imagine that also given the investment needs that go hand in hand with this transition, you also have a kind of a set of expectations from European policymakers in terms of helping you making this transition. Can you elaborate on that a bit? Turn on your camera, please. Sorry,
yes,
microphone.
Thank you. Yes, well, everybody is expecting money from the European Union. Is like a new manna of this, but I think it could be an opportunity to introduce the change that we need. Obviously, as I said, the transformation of the energy model is very difficult, and we need a huge quantity of resources. But I would like to underline not only the question of the money that obviously could help, but also the European Union. I think there is two policies or a debate of new policies. One is the CO2 price more universally that perhaps we have at this moment, and also the discussion about the carbon adjustment mechanism joining with this element of the CO2 price. As you know, there are debate about the European trade scheme to include new sectors, and one of the sectors that is in the table this moment is the maritime sector. So we will have to wait what will happen. I think in June, the European Union have to say something about these ideas. And the other element, unrelated with the investment and with the money and with the budget, is the work that the European Union is this moment on taxonomy. I think that taxonomy also will be a very important element, because decide what is and what is not a sustainable investment could be very important in order to access to the public money, but also to the private financial mechanism. So I think that these two elements together could be very important in the next years for ports, but not only for ports, for all the business and all companies in Europe.
Thanks a lot, Salvador. Given time, this brings us to the end of this very interesting panel on decarbonization in Port of Barcelona. I'm not going to try to summarize everything, because that inevitably is going to fail, but a couple of points I think are worth mentioning. Ports have, of course, this international and local role, and internationally they really need to cooperate, and it's very encouraging to see that cooperation is taking shape in order to really help the shipping industry in transforming. And then when it comes to the local side, they can play and need to play a key role in terms of greening hinterland transport, also in generating energy within the port area. I think this is also a very interesting and relevant opportunity space for ports that they can try to develop business models around that. So I think all in all, we also see from this that Barcelona will have to live up to expectations, and it's good to see that on each of those levels the policies are in place. So I think we have to organize another panel in 5 years' time, and then take a look back and see what we have managed to achieve. But I think so far very interesting, a very encouraging signs. So thanks to everybody for participating. Also thanks to everybody for listening. I hope you found this content interesting. And for now, thanks for your attention and goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.